Welcome to the Mid-Market Edge podcast, where we uncover operational insights for private equity-backed portfolio companies. I'm your host, Kevin Bonfield, and over the last 30 years, I've had the privilege of working with fast-growing entrepreneurial teams, helping them scale, tackle challenges, and seize new opportunities. On this show, we'll talk to industry experts and seasoned leaders who will share practical strategies to drive growth, boost efficiency, and create value in the mid-market. Get ready for an insightful, engaging conversation that dives deep into the real-world issues facing your business.
Welcome to the Mid-Market Edge. My name's Kevin Bonfield. Over the last 6 conversations, we've talked with leaders who have been operating globally over the last 20 plus years. And the things that we talked about are how the opportunity to build global teams has changed over that time frame, and how the tooling and the technology is making it easier for mid-market and lower mid-market companies to start to get into building those global teams. It's lowered the bar to enabling companies to be able to access that talent, that speed, that quality. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to go back and highlight the key learnings that we had over the last 6 conversations, so that you can think of this as a how-to guide or a playbook from the discussions that we've had. I ran offshore programs at Electronic Data Systems from 2006 to 2007. And so I've been operating with global teams now for almost 20 years. And the fascinating thing then was that it really was a set of capabilities that were only open to larger companies. It was in the technology back office, it was in the finance back office, and the companies that did it were really focused on deep capabilities where they could deploy tens or hundreds of people to be able to go and solve those problems. And as we heard from Derek Sharp, the model was pretty similar at that point, which is you took the model from the US, or if you were operating out of Europe, you took the model from Europe and you just exported it, right? You flew in leaders, you trained the team, you embedded them. And part of the challenge was that the middle management wasn't there to enable that leadership. So when I was at EDS, we opened up a new center in Wuhan, China. This is 2007, so obviously a long time before the pandemic happened in 2020. But when we were opening up that center, what we found is that there was access to a lot of raw talent, a lot of English speakers, but the piece that was missing was this middle management layer that could lead these teams and start to take that talent and coach it up. 2 decades later, that is very different. That's not the case anymore. The full stack of team members who can go and execute, and middle management and executives are in place. And the other piece that has been unlocked is that the tooling has caught up. And so, as Mark Blaskovich talked about, you can plug in now and the security issues are solvable. There are virtual desktops. Back in 2006, 2007, we had conference calls, but there was very little screen sharing that allowed you to work remotely. And so the issue then was that you were spending time on calls very early in the morning, very late at night. The collaboration technology wasn't there. And so it was much more challenging, and the companies that were doing this were much more deeply focused on 1 or 2 things. Now that's shifted. The collaboration tools, the advancing skills and expertise, and the providers who are enabling smaller companies to niche down to 1, 2, 5, or 10 individuals as part of their team has really opened up the opportunity. That barrier isn't talent anymore. The decision is, are you going to install the system and let it run? And so here's the way that we tend to think about it. Global teams are not an add-on to what you're doing. They're an advantage that you can deploy in your company as long as you treat it as one operating system. That is, that the team is measured the same way, you have the same rituals, you have the same scorecard, the same culture, so that the people who are operating in Manila or Colombia or Vietnam or in different parts of the US are all clear on the fact that this is the way that we operate, that there is a similar view of how the SLAs are going to work, what success looks like, and there's consistency around security and collaboration, so that the team operates as one. And when you make that shift from this is two different teams or it's two different locations to how do I think about this as one team, the conversation starts to shift from is this a cost reduction play or what's the risk of moving, to this is a capability that we're delivering around the world. How do I scale that up so that I can deliver a better customer experience, a better client experience, and I can go and scale that capability across my business? So let's talk about that in terms of operating system. What does that mean? So there were a couple of examples that came up that really resonated for me. One was when we talked to Tim Hamilton at Praxent. He talked about their 30-minute weekly huddle that they've run for over a decade, and what they've done as a result of having this multi-location team is that they have worked to make sure that it is one team that is coming together. So it's very energetic. The music is up when you arrive. They have a rotating MC. They have interactive shout outs around the world. And what they found was that when they went fully remote, the voices from Argentina and Colombia started to have equal weight in the conversation. And so they felt like they were one team all operating together rather than multiple teams. It was kind of similar when we sat down and we talked to Chris McKee from Venturity. One of the big unlocks that they talked about was issuing company email addresses, which made everybody who was operating out of India at that time feel like they were part of the team. But the thing that is a massive investment that they made is that they started bringing their team members from India into the US, not for a few days or a week to get trained, but for weeks at a time so that they could truly be a part of the core team, building trust, building an understanding of what the company was and the way that the company operated, so that it felt like and was, you are part of our team. You are our teammate. You're not a back of house extension to what it is that we're doing. And what Chris talked about then is that changed the outcome in terms of both retention and performance. And so putting these systems in place, this one system that operates across multiple countries so that it feels like the people who are part of your organization are one team, one culture, that's the unlock which helps you get to success in terms of unlocking that global edge. So let's talk about some of the individual pieces of work that can go on so that you can start down this path. Let's talk about the things that get you from thinking about operating a global team to going and executing one. So the first one is start where the work is repeatable. And so Chris talked about this. He said, with Venturity, and remember, Venturity is an outsourced accounting company. They started in 2006 with their global team, and they started in a narrow vertical. They started off with accounts payable transaction processing. It's very repeatable work. It's work where you can be clear on what the inputs and the outputs are, how you measure success, being clear on standard operating procedures. But the thing that they already baked in early on was that they used overnight processing. And so what that meant was that they could have a team that was in the US, handing off work to India, getting the results back for the next day. So they put in place a very early stage of follow the sun, which meant that while they were lowering the cost to go and execute this one process, they were also improving the customer experience by speeding up the way that accounts payable happened. And so as they saw success there, Then they started to expand it into other components, other processes within the technology space. We talked a little bit earlier about helping that team feel like they were one rather than just two separate teams where work handed off from back and forth. And what Chris talked about is that as you start to invest in your team, then those team members want a career. They want to develop their skills so that they can operate at a higher and higher level. And so now they have people who are operating at different levels within their organization because they have stayed with Venturity, they have developed, and they're executing at that higher level. So building mobility in is a big deal. So this is the second thing to think about, is building that mobility into the way that you structure your teams. We talked to Edward Lim at Doxa. Doxa is a company which was founded a small number of years ago. I think it was 2020, and you're gonna have to blend this one, Kay. So building mobility into the team structure is an important thing, because when people feel like they have a career rather than a job, they grow and they stay and they expand their role. We talked to Edward Lim at Doxa Talent. And as a reminder, Edward is the head of the Philippines operation for Doxa. And one of the stories that he talked about is that in the early days, they had one of their team members, they call them VIPs. One of their team members started off as a financial analyst. And over time, they developed their career and they became the client's CFO. So it wasn't just about, I'm going to have this job and maybe the next job. This was an opportunity for them to grow their skill set, grow the expertise they had, and then grow their career as a result. There are other companies that I know have worked with Doxa in the past, where one of the things that they've done is that they've thought intentionally, really intentionally, about what the different levels are or the development paths are. And they've thought intentionally about what that looks like for the overall team. But are there additional steps or half steps that need to be put in place so that you can make those step ups on a more gradiented basis, so that people can develop through the organization. So think about how to build mobility into the organization, because when people grow, they stay, and that delivers additional benefits both for them and for you. The next one is that this is not just about IT and accounting anymore. Again, we talked with Edward about the different skills that Doxa is now deploying for their customers, and some of them were eye-opening. And so part of this is, if you think about the work as being areas that you need to develop capability that have a level of repeatability that maybe you can expand the customer experience, then it's worth finding out if those skills exist. So there were a couple of really good examples here. One was that Doxa has found specialized estimators in glass and steel, so that when a commercial glass installation company is looking for people who are going to do those contract estimation bids, they now have people in the Philippines who can do that work. And again, it speeds up the response time on bids. And then he also talked about finding people who are operating in winter operations for Walmart. So this is maybe for a larger company, but where they were doing the snow removal command center, where they've got 16 people in a team who are running winter operations for Walmart. So it's not just accounting, it's not just IT. Think about it more broadly. What are the skills that we need? And then ask the question, are these skills ones that are available either immediately, or can we take ones which are very, very close and provide training that allow those capabilities to grow? The next thought is integrate and earn trust early on. And Chris talked about that. I mentioned early on the 6 to 8 weeks in Dallas gave context, allowed them to build relationships, allowed them to understand the inside jokes. I know personally from working with my team that operates offshore, is that going and spending time spending time in country, working with the team makes a massive difference. We have done annual planning in Manila the last couple of years, and it helps really set up the year for success by talking about the context and understanding why it is that we're trying to get to where we're getting to. It builds trust across the team when you've spent time together and you've broken bread. We talked about building the weekly ritual. But then I think that the next piece is understanding that cultural fluency. It's understanding how to operate with people around the world. Charlie Alsmiller talked about the discussions that he'd been having in South America. And because of the way that the culture operates, he said, the room nodded silently. He said that they had this big need for a significant step forward on the work that they were doing, and he wasn't quite sure what was going to happen because as he was talking through what was needed, all he got was some nods and silence. And that wasn't disengagement. He said, he showed up the next day and they had a working prototype that they could leverage. And so being clear on the fact that there are different cultures around the world and understanding how to operate with them makes a massive difference. And also talking about what is typical in your context, what's typical in their context, right? So that you can start to bridge that gap, so that you understand how you're engaging with each other. The other thing that Charlie talked about was a stalled negotiation that they'd had when they were operating in Asia, and he said that one of the big unlocks that they had was that they engaged in, that they changed their counsel, their legal counsel that they were operating with. They brought in a lawyer from Singapore, and that context for what was being asked for unlocked the ability to move forward and get the deal done. And so having those people who are culturally fluent, who can bridge the gap, is an important step forward. And then the last thing is start as you've got that foundation, now start to think about how you're going to scale those relationships so that you've got scalability in the teams that you're building. And part of that is being clear on where the talent density is. One of the things that I found when I was working offshore with EDS was that we were looking for people who could do call center work across multiple languages, multiple European languages. And part of the challenge of that was having to have multiple locations, because if I was looking for French and German and Romanian and Italian and Spanish, it was difficult to find one place where you could get that done. So you were having to build out multiple locations to be able to find that talent. Unless you looked at the history of how peoples had moved through Europe. And so one of the things that we invested in was the team that we had in Budapest in Hungary. And the reason was that over the history of that part of the world, through the Austro-Hungarian Empire, peoples had moved through that part of the world, and so as a result, there was fluency across such a wide range of languages that you could actually have call center work that would cover up to about 15 different languages where people were fluent in Budapest. And so looking at that history to understand where those skill sets are coming from, and then placing those bets so that you have access to that talent allows you to go and build scale. Tim Hamilton talked about that as skill density. He talked about Costa Rica having deep expertise in Java, that Mexico has deep expertise in .NET. So think about where the talent is deep, where that leadership bench is real, and then start to invest in the right locations so that you can build not just a few people, but you can build up to scale once you've got the baseline in place. The other thing that we talked about with Tim was that there are different types of partners that you can use to move forward. At the lowest level of engagement and getting started, you can use contractors. You can work through online job boards, like Fiverr and Upwork to be able to find people who can operate and work with you. That offers flexibility, but it may lack some level of long-term commitment. Then you can start to look for companies that are either an employer of record that will handle that legal and HR complexity, and companies that will maybe bundle that together with being recruiters, right? So they operate as an employer of record, but they will also go and find that talent for you and enable you to go through the interview process and find the right people to be able to build your team. And then at the far end of the scale, you've got companies that will essentially be outcome-based partners. They will not only look for the people to help you build your global team, but they will take responsibility for the deliverables at the end of the day. So they're not just providing staff, they're providing outcomes for you. So thinking about what kind of partnership you're looking for, what kind of team that you want to build is an important first step. And if you combine that with where the skill density is, now you're starting to look at where you can begin and expand from. So let's talk about what the operating system looks like once you get going. We talked about a set of different things that need to be built in to your plan. So we talked about early on about the one operating playbook so that there's consistency around the way that work gets done, whether it's in Dallas or Manila or Colombia. Tim talked about the huddle that everybody gets together on a weekly basis. We've also talked about having one scorecard. So being clear on what success looks like, what the metrics are, and then put it in place so that you've got a clear set of decisions that you're going to operate to, and that there is black and white clarity on what success looks like. The third is think about what those handoffs are, those follow the sun handoffs are, because this is not just an opportunity to lower cost. This is about getting access to talent that you may not have access to in the US or in Europe, and it also helps you think about how you can improve the customer experience by having people around the world. We talked earlier on about the Walmart snow team that deals with those issues. We talked about Chris McKee and having the accounts payable team that were working overnight. There's examples where you can have emergency work or emergency call out work being handled in a different part of the world. So you've got somebody who's working their day shift rather than having to find somebody who's going to work nights in the US. And so that improves the customer experience. You can get work done during the off hours so that the team that is in the US or the team that's in Europe can then pick it up and move at a faster rate. The next thing to think about is security and building that into the way that you're operating, security, collaboration, and test it out so that you know what's going to happen if there are if things start to have issues, if you're going to have outages, how is that going to work? If you have somebody who falls victim to a phishing attack, how is that going to work? But think through the security and continuity early on, and then start to think about how you're going to build that continuous improvement into the way that you're operating. Again, if you've got consistency around standard operating procedures and what success looks like in terms of the metrics, then you can start to build the continuous improvement across the entire organization, taking learning from all corners of the globe to be able to move forward. So that's the backbone. That's the backbone of being able to build a global team. How do you get started? What are the first couple of things to get going? So the first is be clear on the work that you want to test out. Again, pick something small and then and stand it up and start to expand it from there. Be clear on where you want to go, because that's where the talent pools are. And be clear about the company that you want to partner with if you want to get started. That doesn't prevent you from setting up your own dedicated operation later on, but getting started often works fastest and better through a partner. Second is stand it up, hire the team, install the scorecard, start to build that culture across the same team, and see how it works. See if you've got natural leaders who are in that organization who can start to be the mavens for you into the future, who can bring additional people and capability into the organization. And from there, then start to think about, what does the art of the possible look like? Yes, we've tested it out in this skill set and this skill set, but if we were thinking broadly across the organization, where are there capability gaps that we want to go and fill, and where can those global teams start to enable us? The last thing that I tend to think about is, what are the traps or the issues that we may have that we need to think about as we go through this process. So there are 5 that I want to talk about. The first is, if you're coming into this from the perspective of we're just going to do this so that we can save money, the likelihood is that it's not going to deliver the success that you originally expected. Mark Blaskovich said it best: don't just do this to save money. Think about this in terms of the strategic benefits that are available to you, the access to talent, the cycle time reduction, the customer experience benefits. And if you design it that way, then the outcomes are going to compound rather than be on a one-off basis. The second was to think about this as one team. Don't think about the team that you're going to go and build as a back of house, behind the scenes organization, which is separate. Think about it as part of the overall team, and integrate it into one culture. The third is, you've got to be intentional about that culture. Install the rituals and make sure that you're calling on the team members from around the world to be a part of those rituals. If it becomes a loudest person in the room issue, then the overall culture is going to lose. And so, as you listen to the podcast with Tim, there are a number of different insights that he provides, where he's been intentional about making sure that everybody around the table plays a role in the way that they engage in that culture. And then Derek Sharp was talking about the tools that Denison Consulting provide, which will allow you to put data to your culture and understand where the strengths and weaknesses are around the world, so that you can diagnose the issues and go and address them in short order. The fourth is, build the handoffs into the way that the work happens. Build those standard operating procedures, and then you can start to build that follow the sun approach to the way that work happens. And then it's not just a slogan, it's really about process and SLAs and work moving around the world. And then the last trap to avoid is thinking about security. Think about it on the front end. Be clear about the standards that you're going to have. Be clear about access and logging and the continuity issues that you're going to have to be clear on before you get going. If you have those in place, then success is significantly more likely to happen for you. As I wrap up this first series, which is all about unlocking your global edge, I want to thank each of the people who've talked to me as part of the Mid-Market Edge podcast. I want to thank Chris McKee from Venturity for being our first guest and talking about the changes that they made with Venturity to build that culture of one team across the world. I want to thank Mark Blaskovich from Guidemark. He talked about the changes because we worked together at EDS, and the changes from operating at a big company to the types of skills that you can put in place and deploy in the mid-market now was a fascinating dive into the changes that have happened over the last 20 years. I want to thank Charlie Alsmiller from apiworkx. Charlie also came from that larger company background, and now he has executed a global team structure with apiworkx, and he talked about all of the differences that happen culturally and how to work through those. I think one of the best quotes that I heard during these interviews was, "I've worked out 100 different ways to break a contract. I've never worked out how to break a handshake." I thought that was a great quote. Thank you for that, Charlie. I want to thank Tim Hamilton for the discussion that we had about the way that Praxent has put these ongoing operating mechanisms in place and has built a one-team approach to the way that Praxent does work around the world. want to thank Derek Sharp from Dennison Consulting. Derek and I have worked in a number of different places in the past, from Bain to EDS to Travelport and CWT, and he's seen and has built teams around the world that work with him in a number of different companies. And so those practical insights to the things that work were incredibly helpful. And finally, I want to thank Edward Lim from Doxa. He's seeing this from a different perspective. He's seeing this from the provider side and the types of things that successful companies are putting in place to make this real. Our intention when we started off the Mid-Market Edge was that we were going to have conversations that were practical, detailed, operator-friendly, so that you could pick up those learnings and deploy them on a rapid basis. This first series was all about global teams. It's all about unlocking your global edge so that you can be successful in the way that you operate around the world. Thank you for joining this first series, and I'll look forward to joining you again when we unveil the next series for the Mid-Market Edge. In the meantime, keep on building your edge in the mid-market.
Thanks for tuning in to the Mid-Market Edge podcast. For more information, visit the Mid-Market Edge website at midmarketedge.com. Details are in the show notes. Remember to subscribe and like the show so you'll never miss an episode. And until next time, keep building your edge in the mid-market.